I'm Carolyn Whitaker, 29 years old, and for most of my life I believed that love meant sacrifice. I worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads while everyone around me treated that house like it was theirs. They thought I was just the dependable daughter, the one who would always be there to pick up the slack. What they didn't know was that the house they lived in wasn't theirs to control. It belonged to me, quietly transferred by my grandmother long before she passed. And the night they told me to disappear from their lives was the night I decided to show them exactly who held the keys. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been taken for granted by the people closest to you. I grew up in a small town in northern Ohio, the kind of place where folks mow their own lawns and wave to the mailman. My parents, Jim and Diane, worked hard all their lives. Dad ran a modest home renovation business and Mom worked as a school secretary. We never had a lot, but we had enough, or at least that's what I believed. My sister Melissa is 2 years younger. She had this way about her, confident, clever, always the center of attention at school plays or church potlucks. People were drawn to her. I was quieter, steady. I helped where I could, stayed out of trouble, and took care of what needed taking care of. By the time I finished high school, college wasn't in the cards, not with the bills piling up and Dad's business slowing down. So I stayed home. I picked up a morning shift at the diner off Route 6 and worked evenings stocking shelves at the local pharmacy. Every Friday, I handed over my paychecks to help with groceries, the electric bill, Melissa's textbooks. The one person who truly saw me was my grandmother, Margaret. She lived alone in a beautiful old Victorian house with creaky floors and a garden full of lavender. I spent nearly every summer there baking pies, learning how to balance a checkbook, helping her sort paperwork. She was sharp and stubborn with a dry sense of humor and no patience for people who took advantage of others. She used to say, "Caroline, there's strength in being kind, but don't let kindness be the reason you get walked on." During her last few years, I became her main caregiver. I'd stop by every day after work, pick up her prescriptions, help her into bed, keep her company. My parents were grateful in a distant sort of way. Melissa by then was off chasing internships and planning her bright future in marketing. She always had somewhere else to be. What no one else knew, not even Melissa, was that Grandma Margaret had quietly transferred the deed to her house into my name 6 months before she passed. She made me promise to keep it to myself until the time was right. "This house is your safety net," she said. "Use it when you need it. Don't ever let them tell you you're not worth something." After the funeral, my parents and sister just assumed we'd all move into Grandma's house together. I didn't argue. I paid the property taxes, kept the utilities going, fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen. Melissa picked out curtains. My parents decided which furniture stayed and what went to the curb. They treated it like a shared inheritance, but they didn't know the truth. At first I didn't mind. I liked the idea of keeping the family together. Every Sunday I'd cook dinner, and we'd sit around the same table where Grandma used to pour sweet tea in mason jars. When Melissa landed her first big job downtown, they celebrated like she'd won the lottery. Dad bragged to anyone who'd listen. "Our girl's going to be running a whole department someday." Meanwhile, I kept working both jobs, paid every bill that came through the door, said nothing when Melissa asked me to cover her car insurance, or when Mom casually suggested I chip in for Melissa's new wardrobe since she needed to look the part. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself this is what families do. But little by little, something started to shift. And the night Melissa came home in tears, fired from her job with no warning, was the night everything began to unravel. The day Melissa lost her job, it was raining hard. I remember because I'd just stepped into the kitchen to start dinner when my phone rang. Her name popped up on the screen, and I figured she was calling to say she'd be late or maybe ask me to pick something up. But when I answered, all I heard was her crying. She said they'd let her go that afternoon. Restructuring. The entire department shut down. Her voice cracked as she spoke, the usual confidence gone. I told her to come home, that we'd figure it out. I stayed on the line until I heard her car in the driveway. That night, she curled up on the living room couch with a blanket over her shoulders, barely touching the soup I made. Our parents came home not long after. Mom rushed to her like she'd been shot, while Dad just stood there shaking his head. "These companies have no loyalty anymore," he muttered. She gave them everything. For the first few days, we all circled around her, offering advice, bringing her tea, reminding her how smart she was. Dad printed out job listings from the local paper. Mom made a list of networking contacts from church. I helped update her resume and showed her how to tweak her LinkedIn page. Melissa moved back into her old room by the weekend. She brought home bags of clothes and boxes of shoes, more than I remembered her owning. Said she didn't want to keep paying rent on her old apartment when she had space at home. She set up a desk by the window and told us it was her job hunt command center. At first it seemed like she was trying. She'd talk about calls she was expecting, post things online about staying positive during setbacks. But within a week, I noticed she was sleeping later, spending more time scrolling on her phone than sending out applications. When I suggested she stick to a schedule, she waved me off. "I'm processing," she said. "Not everyone bounces back overnight." When she stopped helping with groceries, I didn't question it. She said she needed to stretch her savings. Then she stopped helping with chores, too. "You're barely home anyway," she told me one evening. "Between your two jobs, it's not like you're doing that much around here. It makes sense for me to focus on getting back on my feet." That weekend during dinner, Dad brought up the car payment. Melissa had missed it the month before, and he looked at me when he mentioned it. "Caroline, maybe you could cover it this month, just until she finds something again." I nodded, told him it was fine. I figured it would be a one-time thing. Melissa didn't say thank you, just smiled and said, "Knew I could count on you." The next morning, she asked if I'd mind switching bedrooms. Said the master had better lighting for Zoom interviews and more space for her setup. "You're barely home," she reminded me. "Wouldn't it make more sense for me to use it, at least for now?" I didn't respond right away, just kept folding the laundry. My parents started talking differently after that. They'd say how proud they were of Melissa for staying so focused during this tough time. When I came home tired from work, they told me I was lucky to have job security. "Melissa's under real pressure," Mom said once. "You could be more supportive." I kept hearing late-night conversations in the kitchen, voices, low papers rustling. They'd quiet down when I walked in. Once I asked what they were working on. Mom looked up and said it was just some budgeting stuff, nothing to worry about. A few nights later, I heard Melissa on the phone in the hallway. She thought I was asleep. "I swear this place is a mess," she told someone. "It's so cramped with Caroline still here. I need space to breathe." That stayed with me. The following week, Dad asked if I could drive Melissa to an interview on Tuesday. He wanted me to take the whole afternoon off. "You can wait for her," he said. "She'll be nervous and could use the support." I told him I couldn't afford to miss work. I'd already picked up someone's shift that day. He didn't take it well. "This is exactly the kind of selfish attitude that holds this family back," Mom said when she overheard. "Melissa is trying to rebuild her life. And you're worried about a shift at a diner." The way she said it, like the work I'd been doing for years didn't matter. It hit me harder than I expected. Melissa's behavior started changing too. She'd leave dirty dishes in the sink, laundry scattered in the hallway. When I asked her to pitch in more around the house, she looked at me like I was the unreasonable one. "I'm under enough stress as it is," she said. "You've never had to deal with real career pressure, so maybe don't lecture me." One afternoon I came home to find the living room rearranged. Melissa said she needed more space for filming mock interviews. Dad had helped her move the couch. Nobody had asked me. The worst came during another Sunday dinner. I'd made roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, the same meal Grandma used to make. Melissa didn't even look up from her phone. Out of nowhere, she said, "You know, some people probably think you're just dead weight around here." I looked up. "I pay most of the bills," I said. Money isn't everything, Mom jumped in. Your sister has real goals. She needs support right now. You could try being more helpful instead of keeping score. Every time I tried to rest, I was told I wasn't doing enough. When I worked late, they said I wasn't present. When I stayed home, they said I wasn't trying to grow. It was like no matter what I did, I was wrong. Then Dad asked if I'd thought about moving out. Melissa's getting back on track, he said. She might want some space soon. You're nearly 30, Caroline. Maybe it's time to start looking for your own place. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and took another bite of mashed potatoes. I didn't sleep much that week. I kept thinking about what Grandma used to say, that kindness should never be confused with weakness. And as the noise around the house grew louder, I started hearing something else in the back of my mind, the sound of a dresser drawer sliding open and the soft rustle of papers I hadn't touched in nearly 2 years. The papers were exactly where I'd left them, tucked deep in the back of my dresser drawer, inside a faded manila folder, with my name written in Grandma's handwriting. I pulled them out slowly, careful not to bend the corners. It had been almost 2 years since I last looked at them. The title at the top of the first page still made my breath catch transfer of property deed. Right there in bold letters, it named me Caroline Ann Whitaker as the sole legal owner of the house. I sat on the edge of my bed with the folder open across my lap. The air felt heavy, like the quiet before a storm. In the hallway, I could hear Melissa laughing softly on the phone, her voice muffled by the door. The next morning, nothing seemed different. Mom was humming while making coffee. Dad was flipping through the paper at the kitchen table. Melissa didn't look up from her phone. No one had any idea that the girl they'd just told to start thinking about finding her own place already owned the roof over their heads. At work, I moved through the day like I was watching it happen from outside my body. My manager at the diner pulled me aside during the lunch rush. "You doing okay?" she asked. "You've seemed off lately." I nodded, told her I was just tired. She patted my shoulder and handed me a to-go coffee someone had accidentally made twice. "Drink this. You've earned it." Back at home, things escalated quickly. Melissa started asking for more money for gas, her phone bill even a few dollars just for coffee, because she was meeting someone to talk about a possible job. When I hesitated, Dad spoke up. "She supported us when she had a job. It's your turn now." Except she hadn't. Even when Melissa had been working full-time, I was the one paying most of the bills. They'd rewritten it all in their heads. That week, I noticed Melissa printing something late at night. She left the stack on the dining room table by accident. When I looked closer, it was a set of job applications, half-filled, some not even signed. The dates on them were weeks old. The next evening, I brought it up gently. "Have you been able to send out any of those applications?" Melissa didn't even look up from the couch. "Don't pressure me. I'm being strategic. It's not about quantity. It's about timing," Mom chimed in from the kitchen. "Job hunting isn't what it used to be. You have to be patient." A few days later, we sat down for what I was told would be a family budgeting talk. I came in with a notepad. I left feeling like I'd been dragged through a court hearing. Mom opened with, "We've noticed you've been withdrawn." Melissa added, "Honestly, your energy has been hard to be around." I asked what exactly they meant. Dad said, "You always seem resentful. Maybe if you weren't so negative, the house wouldn't feel so tense." Then Melissa said, "Maybe things would be better if you weren't here at all." I looked at each of them. None of them laughed. No one took it back. Dad folded his arms. "We're not trying to hurt you, Caroline. But this isn't working. We've decided you need to move out. We think it's time." My heart was beating so loud I could barely hear his last words. I looked at Mom. She nodded. "1 week," she said. "You're an adult. It's time you figured things out." They were serious. Melissa looked almost pleased. I went back to my room and closed the door behind me. I sat on the bed and stared at the same folder I had opened just days earlier. My hands weren't shaking this time. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Weller, Grandma's old attorney. He answered right away. "Caroline, how are you?" I told him what had happened. I asked him to confirm that everything Grandma put in place was still valid. Every bit of it, he said. "You are the legal owner. They've been living there as your guests. You can decide what happens next." He offered to draft the paperwork official notice, everything I'd need if I chose to act. For the rest of the week, I kept my routine. I got up, went to work, made dinner, folded laundry. Melissa complained about the internet speed. Mom asked if I could pick up paper towels on the way home. Dad watched the evening news like always. They didn't ask where I'd be moving. They didn't offer help. It was like I'd already disappeared. Saturday morning, I found a grocery list on the fridge written in Melissa's handwriting. At the bottom, she'd scribbled extra snacks. Need for my room? My room. She already considered it hers. That afternoon, I packed a small overnight bag and left it in the trunk of my car. I called Mr. Weller and told him I was ready. Sunday dinner came as usual. I made roasted chicken and corn casserole the way Grandma used to. Everyone sat around the table eating like it was any other night. I placed a large manila envelope right in the center beside the bread basket. Nobody asked what it was. I waited until the plates were cleared. Then I picked up the envelope and said, "Before I leave this week, there's something you should all know." Melissa raised an eyebrow. "What now?" I opened the envelope, pulled out the deed, and placed it face up on the table. "This house isn't yours," I said. "It hasn't been for a long time." They leaned in to read. Mom squinted. Dad reached for the paper with both hands. Melissa froze. "I own it. Grandma transferred it to me 2 years ago, and now I'm giving you 30 days to move out." The room went silent. Nobody moved. The room had fallen into a kind of stillness I hadn't felt before, not during our arguments, not even the night they told me to leave. Dad held the deed in both hands like he wasn't sure if it was real. Mom stared at the envelope, her lips slightly parted. Melissa looked back and forth between us, waiting for someone to speak. Dad was the first to try. This can't be right," he said, flipping the page over, as if more information might appear. "You're saying Grandma left it to you." I kept my voice even. "She didn't leave it in her will. She transferred it while she was still alive, 2 years ago. Everything's been handled legally through Mr. Weller." Melissa stood up so quickly, her chair scraped the hard wood. "You're lying," she said. "Grandma told all of us the house was going to stay in the family. She wouldn't just give it to one person." I reached for the second set of documents, transfer records, tax forms, notarized copies, and placed them next to the deed. She wanted to make sure I had something solid. That's what she said, something no one could take from me. Mom finally spoke. Her voice was small, almost hoarse. "But Caroline, we didn't know. If we had known, we never would have." "You told me to disappear," I said. "You gave me 7 days to figure out where I'd go, how I'd afford it, where I'd live, in the house I've been paying for." Dad set the deed down and pushed his chair back. "That was just stress. We didn't mean it." Melissa's eyes were wide. She didn't sit back down. "Are you seriously kicking us out? You'd make your family homeless over a piece of paper." "It's not just a piece of paper," I said. "It's my name, my responsibility, and the same way you gave me a deadline, I'm giving you one now. 30 days. Mom started to cry, then quietly at first. "Where would we even go?" she asked. "Your father's business isn't bringing in enough for rent, and I don't have anything saved. We can't afford to just move." "I understand," I said. "But I also had to think about that, didn't I? When you told me to leave." Melissa walked over and picked up one of the tax documents, scanning it like there might be a loophole. "This is insane," she said. "You must have manipulated her. Grandma would never do this. She was probably confused." "She wasn't confused," I said. "Mr. Weller met with her more than once. Everything was witnessed and signed. She knew exactly what she was doing. Dad leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His voice dropped. "Let's not make this worse than it has to be. You made your point. Fine, the house is yours. But we can fix this. We'll pay rent. We'll start over." Melissa's tone shifted too. "Yeah, we can just move forward. We'll all chip in, treat each other with respect. It doesn't have to be some big punishment." I shook my head. "I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it because I can't stay in a place where I'm treated like I don't matter while I carry the weight for everyone else." Dad tried again. "We raised you, fed you, sheltered you for years. Doesn't that count for something?" I looked at him. "When I finished high school, I started working 2 jobs. I gave every extra dollar to this family. I didn't go to college so Melissa could. I took care of Grandma when no one else did. When exactly did you support me?" No one answered. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. Okay. I didn't mean to say those things. I was just scared." "Everything was falling apart. I know I said, but you still said them, and you meant them enough to keep saying them over and over." For a long while, no one spoke. The papers sat there in a neat pile, untouched now. The table felt smaller somehow. "We don't have a backup plan," Mom said softly. "What are we supposed to do?" "The same thing you expected me to do," I said. "Find a place. Figure it out. You have each other." That's more than what I was left with. Dad rubbed his jaw, looking like he wanted to argue but didn't know where to start. "I'll be staying with a friend during the transition," I told them. "I've already spoken with Mr. Weller. You'll get the formal notice in writing this week." I stood up and gathered the documents, slipping them back into the envelope. As I left the room, I heard Melissa whisper, "She really did it." I stayed with Sarah from the diner that first week. She had a small guest room behind the laundry area, and even though it was nothing fancy, it was quiet. The kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years. I still went to work like usual, still picked up extra shifts. But when my shift ended, I didn't drive back to the house. I drove to somewhere I felt safe. Back at home, they must have thought I'd backed off, changed my mind, or lost my nerve. I didn't say anything, didn't show up with boxes or ask how the packing was going. I let the silence do the work. Mr. Weller sent the 30-day notice by certified mail. I had a copy in my glove compartment just in case. The following Friday, I came home just before 6. Melissa's car was in the driveway, along with Dad's work truck and Mom's sedan. I'd stopped at the market on the way and picked up a rotisserie chicken, a bag of green beans, and a lemon pie. I walked into that house like I hadn't been pushed out of it 2 weeks earlier. Melissa was in the living room scrolling on her laptop. She glanced up and narrowed her eyes. "You're back." "Just for dinner," I said. She didn't answer. I washed the green beans, trimmed the ends, and boiled a pot of water. I set the table for 4 Grandma's old dishes, the pale blue ones with the faded floral edges. I laid the pie in the center, next to a cream-colored envelope sealed and ready. Dad walked in from the garage just as I was lighting the candles. "What's all this? Just dinner," I said. "Thought we could all sit down one more time." He frowned but didn't object. By 6:30 we were all seated. Nobody said much at first. I passed the chicken-scooped potatoes onto Mom's plate, poured tea from the old glass pitcher. It was the kind of quiet that has weight to it, like everyone's waiting for a shoe to drop, but no one wants to be the one to kick it loose. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "So, we got the letter." I nodded. Melissa pushed her plate forward. "You really went through with it." I did. Mom looked at me carefully. "Caroline, can we please talk? Really talk?" I picked up the envelope and placed it beside her plate. "Everything's in there. Legal notice copies of the deed, rent records if you want them." Melissa sat back in her chair. "This isn't how family treats each other." I didn't respond. I was going through something. She went on. "You have no idea how hard it was to lose that job." I didn't say it wasn't hard. I needed time. I needed space to figure things out. I gave you both. I said. All I asked was to be treated with basic respect. Dad folded his napkin in half. We weren't trying to hurt you, he said, but you have to admit, things were tense. I nodded. They were. Mom leaned forward. But this, evicting us from the only stable place we've had, that's not a solution. You all gave me a week's notice, I reminded them. You told me to leave with no plan, no money set aside, no backup. You never even asked if I'd be okay. Melissa shook her head. We didn't know about the deed. That's true, but you knew how much I did for this family, and you still treated me like I didn't belong. No one argued with that. We're willing to stay, Dad said after a long pause, under new terms. We'll pay rent, we'll contribute equally, we'll do it right this time. Mom nodded quickly. We can draw up an agreement, put everything in writing. I looked at the three of them. I don't want tenants, I said. I want peace. This house has never really felt like mine, not with how things were. I need that to change. Melissa stared at me like she didn't recognize the person sitting across from her. You're really going to go through with this? I am. There wasn't much else to say. We finished eating in near silence. After clearing the plates, I washed the dishes and dried my hands on the same towel Grandma used to keep near the sink. As I turned to go, Mom followed me to the front hallway. If we leave, will we ever see you again? I paused at the door. I don't know yet. I stepped outside. The air had cooled and the porch light cast a soft glow over the railing. In the distance, I could hear a dog barking and the low hum of a passing car. Behind me through the window, I saw Melissa standing in the dining room, staring at the now empty chair I'd left behind. They moved out 2.5 weeks later. I didn't go back to the house until the day after they were gone. Sarah offered to come with me, but I told her I needed to do it alone. I pulled into the driveway just after noon. The garage was empty. The curtains in the front windows were pulled back the way Grandma used to keep them. For the first time in a long time, there was no noise behind the door. I stood in the entryway for a moment, taking in the quiet. No TV in the background, no arguing down the hall, just the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the old floorboards. They hadn't left anything behind. The master bedroom was bare. Melissa's room had nothing but dust along the windowsill. The dining table was pushed off center like someone had tried to move it and changed their mind. I opened the windows one by one, letting the breeze in. Then I went room to room with a trash bag picking up forgotten receipts, an old sock behind the dryer, the things no one thinks to take when they leave. That night, I slept in the master bedroom with clean sheets and the window cracked open. It felt like a new house. The next few weeks were quiet. I painted the kitchen a soft yellow. I moved Grandma's rocking chair into the front room and added a new cushion. I replaced the porch light. Small things, but each one felt like a step back toward something steady. I kept going to work. I stopped taking extra shifts. I started sitting outside in the evenings with a cup of tea, listening to the neighborhood wind down. At the end of May, my manager pulled me into the office. "We'd like to offer you assistant manager," she said. "You've been holding this place together longer than we realized." I accepted the promotion that same day. Later that week, I enrolled in 2 online business courses through the community college. Mrs. Weller helped me figure out the financial aid forms. I started thinking for the first time about opening a small bakery. Something simple, coffee pastries, fresh bread on weekends. Sarah came by with her kids on Sunday. They brought a basket of lemons from her cousin's tree. Her daughter drew a picture of my house and taped it to the fridge. A few nights later, Marcus from the pharmacy invited me to a backyard dinner. I sat at a picnic table with 5 people I barely knew and felt more comfortable than I had in years. A month after they moved out, Dad called. He didn't leave a message. A day later, Mom texted, "We're staying in a small apartment on Oak Street. It's not ideal, but we're managing. Hope you're well." I didn't answer. The following week, Melissa sent a string of messages. The first was an apology. The second was a complaint about the Wi-Fi at their new place. The third was a photo of an interview outfit asking for my opinion. I turned off notifications for her number. In therapy, Dr. Fields helped me name what I'd gone through. She said it plainly emotional neglect, financial dependency, distorted roles. We worked on boundaries, on quiet, on permission to not respond. You were raised to believe your value came from what you gave, she said. Now you're learning how to exist without giving it all away. I kept the front bedroom empty. I planted marigolds along the walkway. I started journaling before bed, just short notes about the day. Sometimes I wrote down 3 things I was grateful for, even if one of them was just a warm breeze through the kitchen window. One evening, Sarah invited me to a family cookout. Her cousin James was visiting from Columbus. He taught middle school science. He helped me carry a folding chair out to the lawn. We talked about music and small towns and what it's like to start over after 30. He didn't ask about my family. When I told him pieces of it, he just nodded and said, "That makes sense." Then he asked if I wanted to meet again sometime. I said yes. We walked to the farmer's market that weekend. He bought a jar of honey from a local vendor. I picked out 2 loaves of sourdough and a basket of strawberries. We sat on a bench near the courthouse fountain and watched a group of kids chase each other around the sidewalk. The sky was clear. The air smelled like sun-warmed concrete and fresh basil from someone's bag. "It's nice here," James said. "Simple." "It is," I told him. A week later, I saw Melissa's name in my mailbox, a handwritten letter. The return address matched the apartment Mom had mentioned. I opened it at the kitchen table. She started by saying she was sorry, not just for what she said, but for how long she believed she was owed something. She said therapy was helping, that she was beginning to understand her own behavior, that she didn't expect forgiveness, but she wanted me to know she was trying. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beneath the silverware. I didn't know what I would do with it yet. But I knew one thing for sure. The house was quiet now, not empty, just calm, and I had space to breathe. The apartment they moved into was on the east side of town, across from a shuttered hardware store and a gravel lot that used to be a gas station. I passed by it once on my way to the post office. Their window looked out onto the street. No porch, no trees, just the hum of traffic and the rust of chain-link fencing. Mr. Weller confirmed the house had officially transferred back into my full possession, free of any disputes or lingering claims. I signed the final document in his office the second week of June. He slid the paperwork into a blue folder, closed it, and gave me a look that said more than words could. I nodded. That was enough. The messages from my parents slowed down after that. Mom sent one asking if she could stop by to pick up a photo album. I told her it would be on the porch at noon, and that's where I left it. She didn't knock. Dad called again in July just once. No voicemail. The next day, I got a text. "We're getting by. Thought you should know." I didn't answer. Melissa's messages came in waves. A short apology, a long one, a question about a childhood book she wanted to find, a photo of her new office, just a desk in a shared space, but she captioned it, "Starting fresh," then silence. By the end of the summer, I'd stopped checking as often. The house had changed. I had painted the guest room sage green and moved my books in. I had a small desk by the window where I paid bills and studied. On weekends, I baked in the kitchen with the radio playing soft jazz and the smell of cinnamon filling the house. I added curtains to the back porch and planted a row of daisies that bloomed into fall. James started coming by more often. He helped repair the gate and build a planter box for the herb garden. One afternoon, he installed new knobs on the kitchen cabinets and asked if I wanted to pick out tiles for the backsplash. We went to the hardware store that weekend just to look. "Have you thought about renting out the upstairs room?" he asked. "Could be a good income stream." "I might," I said. We left with a box of tile samples and a paint swatch in the color of sea glass. The bakery idea was taking shape, too. Mrs. Leland, the owner, had pulled me aside one evening before closing. "You've got a good eye for detail," she said, "and customers like you. I've been thinking about stepping back. You ever thought about taking over?" Eventually, I hadn't answered right away. She tapped the counter with her pen. "Just think about it." That night, I sat at the table with my laptop open, looking at licensing requirements and small business loans. I made a spreadsheet. Then I made a second one just for dreams. In early September, I got a card in the mail. No return address, just my name in careful handwriting. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. The note was short. "Caroline, we understand. We were wrong. We're working on it. We hope you're doing well." It was signed by all three of them. Dad's name first, then Mom's, then Melissa's, in smaller letters at the bottom. I placed it in the drawer with Melissa's earlier letter. I didn't need to read them again. It was enough to know they were trying. That weekend, I hosted a small dinner in the backyard. Just Sarah, Marcus, James, and a couple neighbors from the block. We strung up lights across the fence and ate under the stars. Sarah brought her peach cobbler and Marcus grilled chicken on a portable charcoal grill. James brought a folding table and a pitcher of iced tea. After dinner, someone asked how long I'd lived in the house. I told them it had been in the family for a while, that I'd grown up visiting my grandmother there, that it used to feel like something I was just passing through until it didn't. Nobody asked more than that. Later, while folding up the chairs, James handed me a small box. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a simple wood key holder with 4 hooks and a little carved house on top. "You've made a home," he said. "Thought you might want a place to keep your keys." I hung it by the front door the next morning. That night before turning in, I stepped out onto the porch. The sky was dark and full of stars. The street was quiet. I looked out over the yard and listened for a moment, and for the first time I realized I wasn't waiting for anyone to come back. The first Thanksgiving I hosted in the house was quiet but full. Sarah and her husband brought their 2 boys and a folding table that barely fit in the living room. Marcus showed up with a sweet potato casserole and his partner Daniel, who brought paper crowns for everyone to wear. James carved the turkey on Grandma's old cutting board, the one with the worn edges and faint knife marks that never quite disappeared. We pushed the furniture aside and added mismatched chairs. The room was filled with conversation and second helpings and the sound of real, unhurried laughter. No one argued over who sat where. No one kept score. Before we ate, James asked if we could go around the table and say one thing we were grateful for. When it was my turn, I looked at the people sitting in front of me, people who'd shown up not because they had to, but because they wanted to. "I'm grateful," I said, "for learning that love doesn't mean losing yourself, and that you're allowed to build a life that feels like yours, even if it looks different from what others expect." No one said anything for a moment, and then Sarah raised her glass. "To new chapters," she said. After dinner, the boys helped carry plates to the kitchen, and Daniel played piano on the old upright in the corner. The music drifted through the house, soft and familiar. I stepped out onto the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and looked out over the yard, lit faintly by the glow from the dining room window. I could almost hear Grandma's voice in the wind, that gentle, steady tone she used when she wanted me to pay attention. "Kindness is a strength, sweetheart, but don't let it be your cage." She was right. For years I had mistaken self-sacrifice for love. I had believed that being needed was the same thing as being valued. It took losing what I thought was family to understand what family really is. It's not who demands the most from you. It's who meets you with respect, with honesty, with care. That house, her house, had once been filled with noise and demands and the weight of things unsaid. Now it was mine, and not because of a deed or a legal signature, but because I had learned how to make space for peace and for people who offered love without conditions. I don't know what the future holds with my parents or Melissa. Maybe we'll speak again. maybe we won't. But I'm no longer building my life around the hope of who they might become. Instead, I'm planting new things. I'm baking on weekends. I'm studying business in the evenings and learning how to say no without guilt. And most of all, I'm giving myself the same kindness I used to give away so easily. If you've ever felt like the only way to belong was to shrink yourself, I hope you remember this real love won't ask you to disappear. It sees you, holds space for you, and lets you grow. Thanks for listening to my story. If any part of it resonated with your own journey, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you know someone who needs a little reminder that their worth isn't measured by what they give, feel free to share this with them. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe. There are more stories to come.